All right, we're on air. Today is Thursday, March 26th. And instead of going through our normal list of weekly issues, we have something more exciting to talk about this week. But before we get there, let's have everybody do a quick introduction and say what your name is and something fun you might want to share with us this week in 30 seconds or less. So Luke, how about we start with you?
All right, I'm Luke McCormick. I'm in Danville, California, near San Francisco. Uh, I'm a web project slash product manager, which means that I like to figure out things you can do with websites more than I like actually doing them.
Let's do Joseph next.
I'm Joseph. I'm from Las Vegas, and uh, I don't know. I'm here because I like making UX and backend tools and make configuring the look of sites easier.
Great. Peter, are you able to introduce yourself today?
Yeah, Peter from Estonia. I've been working on some Tugboat integration for Backdrop to get pull request sandboxes working.
Great. I'm Jen Lampton. I'm here in Oakland, California, where it's a beautiful day today. And I am really interested in talking about this design theme initiative, which is what we're going to get into next. So we were talking a little bit before we turned on the recording about trying to figure out why Backdrop and Drupal themes, when you install something from Contrib, don't always look great on your site. And one of the things we just identified is the fact that there are so many places that you can customize a Drupal or Backdrop site that it is often that the theme you're trying on did not account for your particular customizations. And we were brainstorming ways that we can make a standard set of things that if someone's providing a Contrib theme, they would be able to use the style guide module, turn it on, style everything that's in the style guide module, and then that would be a really good starting place for a Contrib theme. It would work on most use cases. And so we were talking in particular about views, which have a million different ways to customize them. We were talking about using the views display, the way the content is displayed, the way the fields are displayed. All of these things have little teeny tiny bits that if someone changed like the way a date was rendered, it might break the styling of the way the date was printed on the page. And so Luke was about to tell us the biggest problem with themes in Drupal, or a problem we've inherited.
Hmm?
So do you want to go ahead and do that?
Sure.
Uh-oh, we lost your sound. You come unplugged.
Good thing. How about now? Can you hear me?
Yep.
This headset has like a very a trigger for mute that I always forget about until I sit on it. as we just saw. Anyway, did my intro come out or was I muted? Oh yeah, it was on then, right? All right. Anyway, 10 years ago when I first got into Drupal, I was, and what drew me into Drupal was how plug and play. I was able to do lots of common web things, particularly set up the information architecture, the way I could design content types and put fields together and put taxonomy pieces together, and particularly views and panels were like immediately obvious, place things around and the layout stuff. And then it came to the point, okay, well, let's, it all looks bare bones, let's change the look. And theming turned out to be just wildly harder than all the other stuff that I'd done at that point. For most of the sites, I wasn't all that fussy about what they look like. They just had to look, reasonably good. The content was all about the thing. I just needed to be able to make some choices. But within Drupal, if you looked at the 20 most common 20 most popular Drupal themes, they were all starter themes. And, the instructions for each of them. And as a beginner, I was looking at the instructions and they're like, well, as you know, when you're theming, you're always, this theme takes care of those common theming tasks, none of which I knew. I had no idea what a common theming task is or what people had been dealing with. And so it was all, providing answers to questions I had never asked. All I wanted was to put a skin on a thing and have it work. And I feel like within Backdrop, we've kind of inherited this sort of professional culture of how to of how things are made. That at some point along the line, some expert, in order to successfully get a Drupal or Backdrop project out, at some point along, you're going to need a CSS expert who's, someone, you need a front-end designer. You need someone who knows, CSS and HTML to deep professional levels in order to make it work. And, probably JavaScript as well. Whereas in WordPress, as the most obvious example of sort of the other case, you can choose between half a dozen themes that come with it. They roll out a new one each year, and then lots of free ones available. And then there's a whole community of commercial but not very expensive, $50 to buy a professional theme, which I think is what most serious like bloggers do. Anyway, long story short, I feel like we should be able to close the gap. We should be able to answer this if we understand what the questions, if we know what to ask. And the chit chat that Jen and I were having before the meeting started, I feel like highlights that. So you had said that like the problem with moving one theme to another site is that the customized pieces don't fit, right? That the views all have specific names and those have to match. And it's actually a relatively, you have to know what you're doing to be able to change those parameters to make them fit. So I wonder, is there a useful subset that we could
There
do?
must be. I mean, I think Joseph was on the right track with, we know like out of the box views has like a teaser view and it has a list view and it has an unformatted view. And if you got those three, that would be a huge thing right off the box. Then some people like the table view. There's like a handful of them in core. If we're like, you had to support all 5 of these options or however many there are, then you'd know that if somebody had a blog view and they changed it from a teaser view to a field style, it would still look good. It would just get a different style from the theme. So that might be one easy thing to do. I've noticed when working with these like HTML template themes that I download from like ThemeForest and stuff, is that most of the, like they have, it might be the same exact markup for 4 different views and they'll all just be an item list, but they'll have different IDs on them. And in the views UI, you have to like add the identifiers for the view. So like when you create a list view, it would look exactly the same in all places, except for you're like, no, this is the like thumbnail list view, and you add the like thumbnail class, and then all of a sudden it'll inherit that section from the theme. So it might be like, I know Wes made a plugin in the block UI that would pull classes that were available for blocks in the theme. He had a contrib module that he wrote that did that. If we could do something similar in the views UI that would give people an interface that was able to pull available classes from the theme, that might also be really interesting, because then when you were theming, you would say, okay, well, here's the standard stuff that comes in core, and here's the things that my theme has provided that's different. And then when you're in the user interface, the person who's editing the view would say, oh, look, my theme is providing these 4 other styles. And as long as I choose one of those 4, I know it's going to look good. But as soon as I choose something outside of those 4, I don't know if it's going to look good or not.
Yeah.
And that way it would also, rather than feeling like, oh, nobody worked on this theme to get this finished, you know exactly what was finished when you were looking at it. It wouldn't be like guess and check, like, does this look good? Does this look good? Does this, oh, they only did one of them.
Yeah.
And then I think that might give a little bit more connection between like the code that might be finished in the scenario that was written for and your site, which might be a different scenario. Giving you an easy thing that would be like, this is how you can connect them, might be really beneficial. So I think something like that, where we can like make the user interface a little smarter about what's in the code, might be better. And we kind of have always had this problem with themes where trying to make the user interface aware of something that has the ability to alter the user interface is a little tricky.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think that Wes did a pretty good job of, I think he added something to the info file. And so it's like, if your theme defines these things, it will appear in the interface, and then your theme has the ability to alter it afterwards. But that way you can kind of get in both before and after the other layers of rendering. So that's just, I think, maybe one idea of how we could try and get the two closer together. I also think, I'm not sure if this ended up in the video, Joseph mentioned that we have this module called Style Guide, which provides sort of a baseline of all of the strange things that you're going to get in a Drupal backdrop site that a designer might not think to design for. So I think it was originally intended for designers to be like, oh, messages. I didn't think about messages in my designs. I'm going to look at them and figure out how that goes. But it's also really great for theme developers to be able to say, okay, like, I need to make sure everything in this list looks good while I'm theming it. And so if you forget to theme the messages, but maybe it was in your design, but you didn't see any on the page when you were theming it or something, you might overlook it in that way. There's weird things like tabs that don't show up on most sites, but we get them in Drupal and Backdrop. Making sure like buttons look good in every state, like stuff like that. It all needs to be on there so that you can account for them. And that style guide is sort of incomplete as it is now, because it includes all of the more basic elements like messages and tabs and menu items and what have you, but it doesn't include field display settings, and it doesn't include views display settings, just because there's so much complexity in what you can do with backdoors, and include different layout options. So I think coming up with a common set of these four required, I don't know, 4 is an arbitrary number, but like these things we know every site's going to use and they need to be in the style guide would be good. So
Well,
just,
I'm sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I think style guide is hugely closing the gap to what I have in mind, because you know I envision, hopefully it's kind of an straightforwardly easy thing to do, that in the themes picker and like the themes download section, like for each theme that we had, it'd be nice to be able to click a button and have it apply the theme to the style guide, and you can see like, okay, so this is what this theme's going to make tables look like this, make headings look like this is going to be the font, these are going to be the things, and sort of get those choices displayed. Similarly, and perhaps even easier, I could imagine having like a standard test content, where it's like, okay, here's what the theme looks like on the content. Now I'm not sure if theme and content are too intertwined, if it's possible to have generic content that makes sense for themes. Yeah. Maybe there'd have to be like more than one of them, or that strikes me as it could be a can of worms, and I don't know how big that can of worms is.
I like what you're getting at here. I was sort of having the same thought as you were imagining what you wanted. I was sort of imagining how to build what you wanted. So you're like, this is what I want. And I'm like, how are we going to build it? And so I envisioned like something like an install profile where we could include modules like Devel Generate, which can create sample content. And we could have it spin up a new site, turn on Devel Generate, create a bunch of sample content, apply the theme, and then turn on the style guide module, And then,
Oh, like a tugboat
Could we,
yeah.
button that would fire up a theme demonstration.
So this is also something that WordPress has, or that most sites that sell WordPress themes have, is like a live demo button where you
Yeah.
can see a modified version of the site that carries it. And if we could find a way to have those fire up as soon as someone contributes a theme, that would also be a really good way for the person who developed the theme to click through and go, oh, I forgot something, because everyone's going to see this.
Yeah.
And then they can go and fix it right away. Whereas right now, it's sort of like, you don't know what people are going to see when they test that theme.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to know what to make, all the dots you need to have. Back boxes, whatever.
It
Could
it
we,
feels. Oh, go on.
Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
so there's also a contributable for, that adds like a theme switch.
Yeah.
Could we have like a whatever theme.backdropcms.org would just have some sample content and then have the theme switcher block so you can see like all the themes that have official releases?
Yeah.
Like just have it ready to go and someone wants to go look at it.
So instinctively I'm saying, oh yeah, right now that would be no problem. But just to have all of the themes on it, so that anytime anyone creates a new theme, we would download a copy of that, throw it into our code base, and enable it so that someone could switch it with Theme Switcher. Right now, I think that's reasonable because we don't have that many themes. But 10 years from now, that's going to be a problem.
You can build in scaling things there. You can say like, up to 20, do it
Yeah.
automatically. And I want to have some self-filtering there too. Have the theme author, like have a box they can check, be like, include this in the sample things, or this is a ready to go theme. Or
I still
that
feel
kind
like I would be more comfortable with using a sandbox approach where you get
All right.
a unique sandbox that destroys itself after 24 hours than having one site that we need to maintain that has all of the themes on it. I do like the idea of having like standard sample content though, and trying to figure out a way to get that with views and everything else, I think would be ideal. So I also think like, oh man, it would be so great if you could say, compare these 4 themes, and it would give you a sandbox site with all 4 of them, and you could theme switch between them.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, I don't know. I want all the things.
It sounds like you do know. That sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. Is there any reason not to do that?
It's hard.
All right.
Yeah, so giving people one button that fires up a sandbox site is reasonable. That's what we do now with the demo button on the homepage. But giving people like choose 4 and then compare them user interface isn't something we've done before, so we'd have to build it. So I don't know actually how hard it would be, but it doesn't exist right now where the other thing does.
Right.
The sandbox integration thing, also we have a little bit of experience with that. We've now had a couple of people who've set up sandbox integration using Tugboat, which I think is good. Trying to figure out how, like what goes into this sandbox, I think might be a little tricky. Like, not necessarily what we want in it, but like how to make it happen. Like, do we need a special install profile that contains a bunch of default configuration, or do we just install core and then import configuration? How do we generate the content? How do we make sure it's consistent across sites? Like, do we have starting content where like auto generate these 10 nodes with these 10 strings of text and these 10 images or something? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it seems related to, the sample site problem, which Drupal 8 solved with the umami theme, with the that site, like that kind. I mean, it doesn't have to be that complete, but that sort of idea of having sample content, sample theme doesn't. I mean, it doesn't have to be all inclusive, although you like to think that way.
I really like Drupal 8's umami example. I think
I do too. Yeah.
I so I think when we were working on it in Backdrop, what we wanted to do is get your starting point closer to the example. So rather than having an entirely separate starting point that was empty and an example that was full, we wanted to sort of be halfway there.
Yeah.
I feel like we're starting to run into problems now with the demo. Like the main thing I really like the Umami thing is because someone who's evaluating the product gets a much better idea of what it can do. Whereas if you look at an empty website, you're like, I don't know, it doesn't look like it's doing anything. And you're like, yeah, it's because it's not doing anything yet.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I think that should be in core, but I think that we could start with it being in whatever a theme demo tool is.
Yeah.
So people who are evaluating Backdrop could evaluate Backdrop with a theme on it, and then they'd get a better idea of what it can do.
Yeah.
So
That's a common model for these things. I mean, Joomla, for example, has always, you could say put sample content in, it fills out a sample site, and Drupal Commerce did a similar thing where there was the Commerce Toolkit, I guess it was, where you'd fire it up and it would put a sample store out. So the idea of a example content is a well-worn model.
yeah, I wonder if we could do something with Devel Generate, because the way that works now is very pluggable. So any system that provides its own entity could provide its own hook to put in its own sample content, which is kind of nice. But I feel like the lorem ipsum and the giant block images that come out of it don't make a really great first impression.
Yeah.
But there might be better ways to do that now. I mean, this module Devel Generate was made more than 10 years ago. And it's been enough, so people haven't really worried about it. But I think if we wanted it to be an example for selling a product, it's not quite enough for that. It's enough for developing an empty website if you want to make sure all the things put together.
Yeah. You've seen all the Devel Generate plugins, right? That put more entertaining content in place.
Yeah. So I think we could definitely do something like that, especially around images. I think if we want to make a strong first impression, we've got to have real images and not image boxes.
Yeah.
But I think in order to do that, we should maybe decide on a theme. And for example, the Drupal 8 site was a recipe site. So all of the content they put in was around recipes, and it made it feel very complete and like a good example. We could do something similar. We could do a brochureware site, or we could do something we think might be like a nonprofit site with a donate form or something that we think might be a little bit more attractive to our audience. I don't know. I have a website. I have a recipe site on Backdrop.
We've gone down this road. I mean, remember the kittens?
Yes. What was it? It was like a kit. It was like a pet finder website, wasn't it?
It's something like that. Just pets. I prototyped a thing like a couple of years back, and everyone didn't know why I was doing it, but I did something with the planets just to show okay, some non-controversial topic that you can use to fill up the pages with. But yeah, I mean, there's things like that.
Huh. Well, we've had this idea before. I still think it's a good one. I don't know what our next steps would be. I think maybe this should be part of our design theme initiative thing, would be figuring out, number one, a way to standardize on a site that every theme needs to theme, and then figuring out how to make that happen. So the idea of what it is we're going to do, and then also the how the heck we're going to do it side of it. I feel like there's a lot of options. I don't think any of them are bad ideas. I don't know how to choose what a good one would be.
Well, we're actually implementing Tugboat for it. Sounds like a really sounds within reach, right? Like if we can figure out how to get Tugboat right, and do we already know that to build a site with a specific theme and specific content, specific mix of modules and configurations? I haven't tried Tugboat, so I don't actually know if it's easy or hard, or if that's what it always does, or if that's extending it or what. Is that what Tugboat does?
So with Tugboat, you can basically tell it to how to install Drupal, Backdrop, sorry. So if we had like an install profile that did it all, we could tell it to use that install profile when it's installing it, or we could, I mean, we've just enabled it to install Backdrop automatically, whereas you may want to go back to having an install screen and then people can choose whether they want the standard install profile or a themed install profile or something like that.
Okay.
Or we can just tell it to download these certain modules or themes or layouts or whatever as part of the build process. And it can do that. And it doesn't have to be an install profile, but either way, it's all possible. Yeah.
Okay, so the deliverable to get this done is then install profiles that implement a sample
But I
site,
mean,
right?
one of the things that we'll be hopefully talking about in the next meeting is the pull request that I've got ready to merge or that's close to being merged, which will make install profiles easier to create. So you can create a new install profile based on the standard one, and it'll just include all these extra things that we're talking about. And then that can be a new Tugboat demo site thing.
Right now, does Backdrop
Okay.
Tugboat install Backdrop from a repository? Or
Yeah,
does it
so
go-
there's a separate repository in Backdrop Ops called
Okay,
Backdrop Tugboat, which is the same as current Backdrop Core, just with an extra Tugboat folder, which has all this configuration stuff in it.
so if we wanted to have Backdrop install, we could use the existing one with a new install profile. Or maybe we could also make another repository that has all of the stuff we need in it.
Yeah, either or. I mean, you can have a new repository set up ready to go, and then Tugboat will just do that. Or as part of the build process, you can tell it to pull in another module or install profile or repository or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So that means we have some options. We can do an install profile, but if there's stuff in Contrib that we can't get in core, if we, I don't know, maybe the install profile will be in Contrib too. That would be easy to set up that way, which is great. Cool. Okay, well, we're running out of time on the meeting today, but I think we made a lot of good progress. I think we identified some pain points and have some good solutions. I know we've been wanting to do this with the theme demos for a long time. So I'm happy that we're passionate about it right now. So maybe I'll make some issues in the queue to get our notes down somewhere so we don't forget them. Anything else anyone wants to add today before we wrap the meeting? We've got about 5 minutes left.
So another thing that I've run into a lot when making themes for Drupal 7 is that each contributed model tends to have very different markup. Like if you want to try like fancy drop-in menus, their markup is totally different. So you can't even, like a lot of them will only a dot menu class target. Or like views and panels and content types will all have completely different markup as well. More than just like the different markups, they have different stuff, but like there'll be a particular way of doing things that Views has that doesn't match anything else. And I think that we've made a lot of progress on that, especially having like an actual working responsive drop-down menu out of the box, because then you don't have like as many things to try out. But that was a problem that I ran into a lot in Drupal 7 was inconsistent markup between things.
That's something we should keep an eye out for. And Joseph, as you start to notice it, maybe we'll have an issue somewhere where we can document it, because I do think that's the kind of thing that we might be able to fix with better documentation. Because right now it's like, write whatever you want, and then people write whatever markup they think is, they think is their best idea of what it's going to be. But if we had some standard somewhere where it was like, this is the way your classes should be named, and this is the way your markup, I don't know, they aren't going to necessarily not everybody's necessarily going to follow it, but at least there will be some guidelines for people who are like, what should I do? Oh, here, it's down here. And then they might adopt that instead of thinking up something new.
Right.
Um,
Particularly if there's an easy way to test it, if there's a way to apply it and see.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. I've had that same thing where you install one module and you're like, what is this? What is this markup that's coming out here? And it's just like a whole bunch of like concatenated like tags. And you're like, oh geez, how do I even like override this? I don't know where it's coming from. And it can be completely different than like anything else you have on your site. So that is definitely true. And I think that just comes from having lots of different people writing code. It's just open source. So hopefully documentation can fix that, or at least help. Anything else? Why are your themes so hard? Okay, well, we have some good ideas. Why don't we go ahead and end this meeting and we'll switch over to the dev meeting. Thank you for Peter for weighing in on Tugboat. I think that's going to be really helpful for us. Thank you, Luke, for being passionate about the design theme initiative, and thank you, Joseph, for all of your insight.
All right. And I'm going to try to write an install profile to start to do some of this, I think.
Yes. All right, see you guys in a couple minutes.
All right.